Hello, dear students. I hope that you're all doing great. Welcome to a new science video. And we're still talking about animals' food diet. We said that the food is a source of energy for all organisms, and different organisms have different ways to get the food they need. Let's start with the autotrophs or the producers. These are the green plants that go through photosynthesis to make their own food, which is a kind of sugar. So green plants take the water from the soil using the roots. They take in carbon dioxide via the stomata, and they use the sunlight energy to mix carbon dioxide and water together and produce their food, which is the glucose. And by this process, they throw oxygen into the atmosphere. Decomposers are nature cleaners. We're talking here about cockroaches, flies, snails, fungi, termites, and other examples of decomposers. They decompose dead bodies and turn them into minerals. So they turn minerals back into the soil. Consumers are animals that eat, they consume other organisms. Those that consume plants are called herbivorous animals. Carnivorous animals feed on animals only, while omnivorous animals eat plants and animals. The glucose for the green plants, the dead bodies for the decomposers, plants, and animals are the source of energy for different kinds of organisms. So producers get the energy they need from the food they make. Decomposers get the energy they need from the food they decompose. Consumers get the energy they need from the food they eat or they consume. Let's take this example. Right here, we have the green plant as a producer. This producer doesn't get the energy it needs from anyone, from any organism. You cannot go to a plant and give it an animal to eat or another plant to feed on. No, green plants make their own food. They combine different elements from the nature to make the glucose by photosynthesis. So we start with the green plants. We have the slug. The slug eats the green plant. So it gets the energy from this. The slug gets the energy from the plant it eats. The frog gets its energy from the food it consumes. So the slug is a source of energy for the frog, and the heron too, it gets its energy from the frog it consumes. Let's write this food chain together. We will start with the producer. We should start with this because there is no other organism that can come before, because the green plant doesn't get its energy from any other organism. So we start with the green plant. The green plant is eaten by the slug, you're right. The slug is eaten by the frog. The frog is eaten by the heron. This line shows how energy is transferred from one organism to another organism. Energy moves from the green plant to the slug, to the frog, to the heron. And each organism depends on the other for food. So this is a food chain, and organisms in a food chain are arranged according to the order of food. The green plant is eaten by the slug, so the green plant must come in a food chain before the slug. A food chain starts always with a producer, okay, with a green plant, and it finishes with an animal, a carnivorous animal. The green plant is eaten by the slug. The slug is eaten by the frog. The frog is eaten by the heron. Give the name of the producer. It's the green plant for sure. Why should the food chain start with a producer? As I said, because there is no other organism that can give green plants their energy. They make it by themselves. They make their food by themselves. What are the names of the three consumers? The slug consumes the green plant. The frog consumes the slug. The heron consumes the frog. So these are the three consumers, slug, frog, and heron. Are these consumers herbivorous animals or carnivorous animals? Let's see. The slug eats the green plant, so it is a herbivorous animal. The frog eats the slug, and the heron eats the frog, so both are carnivorous animals. The frog eats the slug, which is an animal, so it is carnivore. The heron eats the frog, which is an animal, so it is a carnivorous animal. This green plant has energy in it. It went through photosynthesis, it made its energy. This energy moves to the slug when the slug eats the plant, okay? Then the energy in the slug moves to the frog when the frog eats the slug. And then this energy moves to the heron when the heron eats the frog. Here is another example of food chains. It starts with a producer. Right here, it's the grass. This grass is eaten by the grasshopper. The grasshopper is called a primary consumer. The grasshopper is eaten by the frog is eaten by the snake is eaten by the hawk. After the producer, we have the consumer number one. The consumer number one is also called primary consumer. It is a herbivorous animal. It is an animal that can eat the plant that's coming before in the first place, which is the first link in the food chain. So producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, which is consumer number two. It eats consumer number one. Tertiary consumer, which is here the snake, it is the consumer number three. The hawk is the final consumer. Okay, look right here. It is the final consumer. We call it also an apex predator. An apex predator because it doesn't get eaten by any other organism. When grasshopper, frog, snake, and hawk die, they get decomposed by decomposers like fungi, and they turn into minerals to the soil. So in this lesson, we're talking about the transfer of energy in an ecosystem or in nature. Let's go to desert. This is a food chain in a desert food chain. It starts with a green plant, which is a producer. The producer is eaten by the primary consumer, consumer number one. The primary consumer is eaten by the secondary consumer. The secondary consumer is eaten by the tertiary consumer. And we have at the end, the apex predator. It doesn't get eaten by anyone. The green plant is eaten by the grasshopper. The grasshopper is eaten by the mouse is eaten by the snake is eaten by the hawk. So the green plant is the producer. The grasshopper is the consumer number one, primary consumer. The mouse is the secondary consumer. The snake is the tertiary consumer. The hawk is the apex predator. It's not getting eaten. It doesn't get eaten by any other animal. Another food chain, but now in the ocean, in water, we have the algae or the algae. They get eaten by the tiny consumers. Tiny consumers get eaten by the shellfish. The shellfish gets eaten by the small fish. The small fish are eaten by the large fish. The large fish is eaten by the killer whale. Okay, right here, the producer, the algae. The primary consumer are the tiny consumers. A secondary consumer, the shellfish. Tertiary consumer, the small fish. The apex predator is the killer whale. Look at the large fish. The large fish is eaten by the killer whale. You're right. So we say that it is the prey of the killer whale. The prey is the animal that is eaten by another animal. Okay? The large fish eat the small fish, right? So the large fish is the predator in this case. A predator is an animal that eats other animals. So the large fish can be a predator and a prey at the same time. Let's take another example. The small fish, for example, or let me talk about the shellfish. The shellfish is eaten by the small fish, right? So shellfish are prey of small fish. They are prey of small fish. But the shellfish eat the tiny consumer. So shellfish are predators of tiny consumers. We are talking about shellfish. Shellfish can be prey and they also can be predators. An animal can be a prey and a predator at the same time. What is a prey? A prey is an animal that gets eaten by another animal. A predator is an animal that eats others. And that's it. Let's go for a quick review for what we just talked or learned. Producers are green plants that produce their own food via the food making process called photosynthesis. Decomposers break down dead bodies, they turn them and they change them into minerals. Consumers consume their food. We have three examples of three big groups of consumers: herbivorous animals, carnivorous animals, and omnivorous animals. Those animals are arranged in food chains. We start with a producer, then we have the primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and at the end, the apex predator. Okay? Thank you for watching. If you still have any question, I'm always available to answer. Take care and bye-bye.